Hello and welcome back to You Matter. Hello and welcome to session 17 of You Matter. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to physiotherapist Martin Christensen. Martin is a physio in Norway. He is the founder of the Society of Average Physios and Failures Facebook group, which is absolutely amazing. He also talks about his failures on Fridays on Twitter. And he has been brave enough today to come and talk to me about being a physiotherapist with depression. The conversation centers largely around that condition, but it's also a platform for us to discuss what it's like to be a clinician with your own stuff going on. So there will be things that you perhaps identify with directly, things that just have shadows or reflections of things going on in your own life, maybe the lives of the colleagues around you, your patients, maybe family members. But it's a long one, but a really important conversation. And more than anything, I'm extremely grateful that Martin approached me to have this conversation on You Matter as a platform. So sit back. I think on the last podcast, I said, make yourself a big cup of tea, maybe make yourself an even bigger cup of tea for this one. Sit back, enjoy, and I'll be back at the end. Hello. So as I say, welcome back to session 17. And I am really glad to be doing this session with Martin Christensen, who is somebody that I have encountered a lot over the last year on different sort of levels. So there's been a little bit of, me watching what Martin's talked about on Twitter. I was very intrigued when he started talking about his failures, and that immediately piqued my interest. That then went on to see Martin forming the Society of Average Physios and Failures Facebook group, which makes me laugh on a weekly basis. And also I'm a really intrigued observer of the type of conversation that goes on there, and maybe the conversations under the conversation. That might be something we talk about a bit later. But Martin, to introduce him a little bit, is a Norwegian physio. Martin lives in the very north of Norway. I'll let him tell you exactly where, because I always forget the name of the islands. He works in private practice. And the reason we're talking today is something quite specific. So a few weeks ago on Mental Health Awareness Week, I put out a post, and in that post, I was acknowledging the fact that a lot of people with mental health issues turn up every day, despite the fact that they often have to make a lot of decisions about whether to turn up at all, how to turn up, and how they're going to get through. And Martin tells me that it was that statement, or something like that statement, which struck a chord with him and prompted him to send me a message and say, hey, Joe, do you want to talk about being a physio with depression? Which I accepted gleefully. It's taken us a few weeks to get to the point of setting this conversation up, but that is the backdrop of this conversation, being a clinician with depression. Now, at this point, I am going to hand over to Martin, let him introduce himself a little bit more. And Martin, would you be happy to just give us a potted history of your depression and some of the pathway that you've travelled from when you first became aware of that to becoming a clinician, and to the point where you are now, a practicing clinician with depression? Would that be okay?
Yeah. It will be okay. It will be probably a long story, but that's
okay. I'll sit back.
sit back and enjoy my travel into despair. So my name is Martin Christensen. I live in northern Norway. I work in private practice, as Joe said. And the island I live on is called Herøy on Helgeland. It's a beautiful place. It's even better than the Lofoten. So if you want to check the Helgeland out, it's very nice. And yeah, I reached out to you to talk about depression specifically because of that post. And the reason I did that was because you wrote that let's shout out to the people suffering and still showing up and doing everything or everyday life. And my beautiful wife has always asked me when I have bad days, would you have gone to work today if you weren't in private practice? And 50-60% of the time I always answer no, probably not. But I still do it. I have to do it. I don't get paid either way. So, all right. So my story is quite a drag, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So I'm 34 right now. I'm a young stud. Well, getting older, I expect. But my journey starts when I was 13 or 14, and something changed in the way I viewed myself and I viewed the world. And what my mom and dad would call my philosophical moment, where I would go silent and look away or leave the play or leave not being interesting in something else, took another turn where I found out that I didn't view the world or myself as others around me did. And I started to feel down a lot, no self-esteem. I started to get really deep into reading fantasy or everything that didn't align with what we call reality or something like that. And just reading, getting away from it all. And it also must be said that I was quite a chubby kid. I was quite a chubby kid, and I have asthma in the north. So, and I grew up in the north of Norway, so it's cold. So you got a kid that's probably 20 to 30 kilos overweight in 1.5 meters of snow in 10 degrees Celsius beneath the freezing. And that's not a good setup to be the strongest, the fastest, the most popular one. And so at the same time, I started to get into this fantasy world and trying to get away from everything else. I was coming from a few years of being bullied a lot about my weight, being called, and I remember this especially because I was called a berg of lard.
A berg of what?
A lard of fat.
Oh, okay.
And my brother would always come home from school or from some practice and tell me what the other kids were saying. So I didn't have quite the best foundation for anything. But at the same time, as I went into this fantasy world, I also stopped eating butter, fats, stopped drinking juices and sodas and everything, and I started growing. So when I was 16, I was 60 kilos, had a six-pack, and I'm pretty sure I looked good back then. Yeah, I'm quite happy when I look back on pictures. I had long hair, long rock and roll hair.
Was that your Thor moment?
Yeah, that's before. And so my journey started when I moved away from my family and my house when I was 16 to go to the equivalent of high school. So I lived on my own in a little studio apartment in Harstad for 3 years.
Is this on the mainland of Norway?
Yeah, no, that's actually an island as well, but it's connected with bridges. So that's up. It's up north, Harstad.
Okay.
It's a small town. But I went to music school there, and I felt quite out of place because I wasn't gifted. I just was trained a lot. I played bass. I couldn't sing, but I trained a lot. Couldn't play the piano, but I tried. So I was quite out of place there as well, and had these periods of ups and downs when I wasn't feeling quite right. And this is the age where suicide gets a big talk about, right? When you're 16, 17,
and gets big
18.
in your head as well.
Yeah, it's get big. And And that's when I experienced that people around me talked about it in a negative way and said, "I never thought about it." But when I was like sitting, "Oh, well, don't you ever want to just be gone?"
Mhm.
No. Are you crazy? That's selfish. Oh, okay. So I still had that feelings, ups and downs, but struggled to recognize what it was.
Yeah.
Then I moved to Oslo. After that, I got to 10 girlfriends, and we moved to Oslo, and where I took a bachelor's degree in history, in Old Norse history. Or
Okay.
it's called cultural and social studies, so social anthropology, sociology,
Yeah.
and everything like that. And again, it was this urge to see something that wasn't around me, to see
Mm.
something else, to see something that I couldn't touch, but I could virtualize in my head, like the Old Norse history,
So
the
more of the
Vikings.
fantasy in many ways.
Yeah, the fantasy world, and the societies in the Amazon and the Pacific Islands and everything in social
Mhm.
anthropology is quite interesting. But then it was in those years, in 1920, I really started to struggle with being around. I struggled to find things that I enjoyed. I struggled to find the pieces of humor that I would want to have.
Mhm.
Um, and I started to fight the idea of not being here, just put it like that.
So that became more prevalent in your thoughts.
Yeah, and that's when I began to recognize it as something else. I began to talk in my head about depression.
Mhm.
Could it be that? Could it be something other? Because I have some self-worth, right? I was beginning to gain knowledge. I was beginning to gain some friends. Not like where I grew up, we had there were 10 people in my class, right? So
Mm.
everybody was friends anyway,
Yeah.
not by choice, but by necessity, right?
Mhm.
So when I moved to Oslo and in university, I started getting friends for who I was, right? And how I talked and my jokes and everything and my interests. So that at the same time as I began to recognize depression for what it was, I was also gaining a bit of self-worth because I was
Yeah.
gaining knowledge, I was gaining competence, I was gaining, yes, something that was me. And I got interested in the body. I took an education on the Norwegian School of Sports Science, and
Mm.
I took what was it, a year's course of training, fitness, nutrition as well, and I started working as a personal trainer. But it's a really shit one at that. I was if I am a shitty physio, I wasn't even shitty a personal trainer because I had a little bit of beer belly. No one else had that. I worked in a studio where everyone was just perfect all the time, and so
Did you get into that for personal reasons? Because that's quite a change of direction from social
yeah,
anthropology to
I
being
think
active
it was the
lifestyle.
allure of being cooler.
Okay.
This was the time. Well, this when I was 19, 20. This is the time where fitness culture is beginning to stepping up a bit, right?
Mm.
It's getting into the mainstream. It's getting a little bit of heat,
Mm.
and I always saw the prospect of me being this cool personal trainer. But then again, I'm failing at that because I can't. One of my struggles has always been I can't plan. I can't plan
Yeah.
very far into the future, right? So I was always been sitting out in 5 years' time, what were you doing? And depending on the day, I would think, well, I hope I'm not fucking here, or I hope I'm still doing. I hope I'm
Mm.
somewhere else.
Mm.
And so that was partly what made me go into fitness. And then I started to learn more about the body, and I wanted to be a physio because I thought physio knew it all, was kind of better. So we moved back to the north, to Tromsø, where I started to study physio. But then I also started to have really bad episodes, ups and downs. Right. So this is 2011, 2010,
And this is whilst
2011.
you're training?
Yeah, as a physio.
Yeah.
And the ups and downs became more prevalent, and the devil on the shoulder became more prevalent. And I could wake up and have a good day, but I could, as soon as I stepped off the bus to school, I would just go, what am I doing here?
Mm.
I want to go home. I just don't want to be here. And just keep on that mask, right? So then the image of putting on your mask for the day became a thing for me, right?
Okay.
So this happy-go-lucky guy.
That was the mask, the happy-go-lucky guy?
Yeah, happy-go-lucky guy was the mask. Yeah. And then I got really good periods as well, where the happy-go-lucky guy wasn't the mask. But so the ups and downs began there. And then I met my wife. She was actually when we go into university, you have this introduction week, right? And you have the second year students taking you all around town and being your guide. And Mari was my guide.
She took her role seriously.
She took her role real seriously. But I was in a relationship at that time, and she was in a relationship at that time. But I kept bumping into her in the halls at university, and I kept looking forward to these bump-ins because I liked her a lot. That when you meet someone and you just go, oh, I just want to see you naked. I just want to.
I was nodding away and then I stopped.
I just want to watch a movie with you. I want to have you with me on the road. I want to, you just. I need it. That distraction. And then this was the time when Facebook was your notifications, and you changed your status, right?
Yeah.
So I remember the night she changed her status from in a relationship to single, and I was sat on the sofa in our apartment with my then girlfriend, and just went, oh fuck. Just because that said something to me, that it turned the switch in me to, I'm not happy where I am. But that's a symbol of I can change something. And I feel that's quite bad for my then girlfriend, but that relationship wasn't good anyway. So,
and was that oh fuck because I've now got to do something about it? It's become real, or something else?
Yeah, I think both of those things, right? So it was like, here I have a chance to take hold of my destiny and the path I'm walking. I'm not just existing anymore. I can. This is something I really want for myself.
Wow.
And so I ended my then relationship, and I invited my wife over for dinner.
Same night?
Now wife. No, that's the same night.
I was going to say
the day after.
Feeling a bit sorry for the girlfriend.
No. So that gradually became that. But of course, that didn't change my projection of ups and downs and my depression. But I had someone in my life that I completely trusted and I wanted to be with, and I that parts of being happy. But so I had that, right?
Parts of being happy. Just talk to me about that.
Possibly, yeah. So, when you talk about depression, the things we can do, you being active, eating healthy, be social, follow your interest, follow your goals, and now I had that foundation, that big part of the possibility of being happy, right?
Okay.
That's how I see it. And my wife always jokes about me being her 85 to 90% man. So she's so happy with me, the way I look, the way I train, when we work together, and the person I am, that, I'm 85, 90% of what she wants, but there's no possibility. The possibility of getting to a 95 or 100% is not worth losing that 90. So, and I think that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Has she ever told you what criteria are in that
Oh, I
elusive
think that's Chris
15%?
Hemsworth. That's
Oh,
just,
okay,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
She's got a high standard.
Yeah. So that's so, and she knows she can't get that, so she'll
Right.
settle for me.
If you can't get Chris Hemsworth, then may as well stay with your husband.
But I actually think that's a brilliant way to look at it. You got all these pieces that flows in together, and maybe we can't expect 100% all the time, but we can't expect 100% all the time. So for me, being with my wife is that big part of the whole picture of being happy, and getting by, and yeah. So
really important part.
Yeah, really important part. And then, okay, so on and off in clinical life, then when I finished my university in Norway, this is 3 years in university and 1 year at work, where you do your rotations and things like that. Yeah, but it's in practice, it's just a year of discovering which douchebags went through the exams, right? Are you fitted to this as well? And my periods of feeling down and not interested in anything, or just having a bad time, became more prevalent, ups and downs. And they started to last longer. I could get 2 or 3 months where nothing ever went right, and I could get 1 or 2 months with good solid thing. And I started to have issues with my stomach and anxiety attacks. It was so bad that we couldn't leave our house before I had to go to the loo, right? And all these things. But so then we got a daughter, the first daughter, 4 years ago now, and the ups and downs went bigger yet again, right? But because I love my daughter and I love that we have kids, but doing the things we do on 4 hours of less sleep every night, and then losing the person you have as your main foundation to
your wife,
to someone else, to Ylva, that's quite hard, right? And my wife became quite ill when she was pregnant with both our kids, so she kind of went away from everything we used to do together, right? So she had to sleep a lot. She was puking, right? Puking the whole.
Did she have that horrible condition? I forget what it's called, but the really heightened sort of morning sickness and
and it went through, and her sense of smell, her triggers, everything. So I think I washed down the house with industrial strength washing 2 or 3 times, washing the ceilings, the walls, the floors. And we had to stop eating most of what we were eating before. We just plain food and everything. So that's a couple of triggers right there, from our clinical life, less sleep, different life situation and everything. So that's probably explains why my ups and downs became quite big. And then of course we got a second. The funny thing is what happens when you get one kid, and then you're slowly getting back together, and when that kid is 2.5, 3 years, and things become more stable, and you're back into that good relationship. Right? The kid's asleep. We can probably have 3 or 4 hours by ourselves. We begin both to slim down a bit because we have time to work out and eat correct goods and everything, and that sexual attraction begins again. And then when the love starts getting up again, we go, "Do you want to have another kid?" yeah, that's probably a good idea, right?
Human nature's a bitch, isn't
yeah.
it?
And then just 1 week after confirming, she was pregnant again, the morning sickness just went on. And then it was only me and Ylva, right? So me and the eldest going on, and still clinical life and everything like that. So ups and down continues, but it didn't really get bad until around Christmas last year. Last year, and my body began shutting down.
Okay.
So I suddenly, well, I had a couple of years that was really bad where I lost interest in many things. I could have a week where I read everything I got up my hands on. I saw all the webinars. I even, when I run my intervals on my treadmill, I would watch 3 or 4 webinars on 4 times speed, just absorbing everything, and then just go down in the basement. And I came home from work and I couldn't talk. Just leave me alone. And my wife would see that and take more than she should have had to, but she did it. And around Christmas last year, my body began completely shutting down. I would fall asleep on the floor, fall asleep in the chair. I would at work, I would suddenly just forget what I was talking about. My clients started to notice that I went away. Those small philosophical moments.
I was going to say, is that what your parents would have called your philosophical moments?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this started, and it went really, really bad. I can't understand why I can't say bad correctly, but and so that became quite bad, and I had nightmares continuously. Couldn't sleep, couldn't wake up, and I had this daily headache that I had since before Vilja was born. So that was 2 years now, just daily headaches.
And you're still working through.
So it's a slow progression into where my body just went, fuck this, I'm out. And overnight, my training changed. Where I before I could easily run 10K, 15K, just slow, good run. Now I struggle with getting 5. My good slow pace was did a 5-minute kilometers, and now it's 7.5. So it's quite notable, objective changes, measurable changes happening. And it just went really downhill. So I contacted and this is the first time, so I contacted my GP.
Just can I describe this as the
course.
first time you've ever contacted a health professional about your...
No, I actually did. I did it once when I was last year on my uni, when I said I feel quite depressed, I feel quite down. And this GP immediately sat forth in her chair and just, we have to talk about that. We can't ignore it. We have to talk about it. And that just put me way off. I was like, no, maybe next time.
Okay.
And just never went back. Right. So, but this is the reason I went to the GP now was because my body was shutting down.
Right.
I didn't have any stamina, any interest. I lost kind of everything I love doing.
So it was the physical symptoms that took you.
Yeah. That's what pushed me over the edge, right? And I told him all of my symptoms and the questions. We took a lot of tests, and the only thing that you could really see was a vitamin D deficiency, which is not in Norway. That's quite regular.
Hard to get that sunshine.
Yeah. And then he just asked, "Do you feel depressed?" I was like, "Yeah, well, yeah." And then he got at the forms they get out. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, to see if you fulfill certain
and
criteria.
Gets so many numbers, and I think this form is you got the worst you can get is 34 points, and I got 31.
Mm.
I was like, this is probably cause for getting you inside a hospital. I was like, yeah, but I can't do that.
Mm.
No. So, and this is a friend of mine, and he's seen me at work and everything. So he went with, all right, let's try some medication. And this is the first time, right? So I'm 34 years old, had these issues and symptoms and struggles since I was 13 or 14.
Mm.
And this is the first time I get any medication for it.
We're 20 years into this story, aren't we?
Yeah. And that was quite a turnaround for me, because I got this Cipralex, it's called.
Yeah.
So it's a
antidepressant.
Yeah, it's a stabilizer for me. Anyway, so my bottoms and tops are gone. I'm somewhere in the middle. Still get the waves, but it's not that big. I'm not so worried anymore. Well, except when the day after you accepted doing, or you said you wanted to do this podcast, then that was a trigger for me, and I went completely down. So bad, actually, I had to take the kid out from home and go shopping to put on the mask again.
Right. But and that was around the idea of talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually. And
I don't mean to sound surprised by that. I'm sure everybody listening would perfectly understand that. I'm sorry you had that reaction, but perfectly understandable.
Triggers, man. You can't. Some you recognize, and some you don't, and some just happens, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been taking medication now since February, I think.
Yeah.
And it helped quite a bit. Oh, I needed to up my dosage. Crucially, I'm a little bit scared about that because I'm almost to the full doses.
Mm-hmm.
And you get that little devil on the shoulder. What happens when you're on the full dosage and you still need to up that? What happens then? What happens when these things stop working at all? What happens then?
Mm.
Because when you had a really long good period, that bad period is just so much deeper and so much worse to get out of, right? When you have it continuously, ups and downs, it may sound strange, but you're prepared for it. That's just the way it is. So you slug through it, right? You just, okay, there's another hill. Let's go on top on that, see if we get on top. When you're on top, and you just do it continuously, right? So
is there anything also around toughing it out? I know how to deal with this. I know how to get through it. And if I take medication, I've taken the easy route out of it. I'm just thinking back to your personal training days and the I mentioned Thor and then you brought Chris Hemsworth in. I don't know how things are in Norway, whether the stigmas are stronger or lesser than over here. There's a million questions in this one. Sorry, Martin, I'll try and stick to one, but is there any part of you that is more comfortable toughing it out than taking the meds?
Oh, definitely. I think it's the reason why I waited for so long. I feel like this when you had children, right? There's something happens to you. You're maturing in a different way. And actually the things I've been doing and saying and writing on Twitter has helped me to relieve some of that expectational burden. If you can say it like that. I'm not that strung up anymore. My ego has probably just, I'm quite happy being wrong now, right? So
glorious being wrong is my observation.
yeah, gloriously wrong. So the toughening it out or just living with it seemed, why would I continue to do that if I can try this? We have been in a couple of sessions as a couple, me and my wife, talking about triggers, which have helped a lot. because my mother-in-law is a big trigger. So,
are you sure? Or is that just convenient?
No, I'm pretty sure we're quite different people, and my mother-in-law is a person, she always asks a lot of questions, and there's always another one, and that can be quite, pushy and going into my boundaries a bit. And so,
do you get any triggers in your clinical work?
Yeah, the days I've had patients with, the complicated stories, bad one, the chronic pain, or the long-standing pain ones, and you recognize your struggles in them and the way they describe it, and you're trying to tiptoe around, but at the same time taking a dive into these issues. And maybe we're not seeing the progression we want to see, or the things that we like to hear. And those days are triggers. Those are the days I will come home and just, I'm taking a dog out for an hour, just hang in there. And those are the days when my wife says, what you want to watch on telly? And I was just, whatever, just put something on. And I'll just glaze over and be on my phone till it's time to, go to bed. And there are periods, of course, in every clinician's life when you accumulate some of these patients and some of these issues more than others, right?
Yeah.
That as well seem to go in waves. So that's a trigger in the immense pressure it takes to take care of another person, right? And at the same time, kind of looking into a mirror of your own problems.
Yeah.
And you can get a bit frustrated by, why can't you see, can't you recognize this? And being the one with just, oh man, I don't know what to say, I don't know what questions to ask, I don't know where to go. So that could be quite hard.
Yeah, and before we started recording, you mentioned that one thing that's really at the forefront of your mind is being a clinician, hearing other people's problems when you're carrying your own. And there's kind of two sides, aren't there? There's the empathy and direct relational bit that you've just spoken about, where what they're saying actually reminds you of the issues that you're carrying.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side where you may have things going on which are nothing to do with, they don't relate at all to what the patient is telling you, but you are still carrying those things in the background. And we talked, didn't we, about maybe there's the odd clinician out there just sailing through their whole career without any distractions, 100% focused on the patient all the time, but between us, we suspected that they were few and far between.
Yeah, I think we all have things and issues and problems that in some way or another will affect our clinical life in some time or another.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, certainly when I'm coaching clinicians, that comes up a lot. It's not always, how do I, there's the obvious thing of taking your patient's problems home with you. And I think probably all of us experience that, certainly perhaps earlier in our careers, and maybe we find ways to lessen that. But in my experience and what I hear from others is not just that, it's the being a clinician that we take home with us. And the the level of attention and care, and maybe outside your life there's even more demand on that side of you than there is in work sometimes. I'm digressing slightly from what you're saying, because you're talking about being in a state which is triggered by conversations you have with your patient. But it's tough. And you said, when you were on the panel discussion on a previous podcast of mine when we were talking about failures, I can't remember your exact words, but you, you just made a very clear statement. Our job is quite a tough one, and we don't talk about that very much.
No.
We're the happy, sunny physios, aren't we? We're the happy, sunny
Yeah.
sector of the health professions.
Yeah, and every big physio out there is telling us to leave the patient at work, right? And to distance yourself from the problems responsible to, not for, your patients. And I think that one of the biggest struggles with having a depression is that the issues you can't, for me anyway, is that I can't always leave things behind.
Right.
And I think Tom Goom had a video up on this, and he actually asked my opinion on it. And one of the good things about that was he had a graph showing where, you know, a problem arises, you're working through it, it escalates the situation, and some can see, okay, what can I do, what can't I do, and leave it at that when the solution comes. But some will just stay up there in that constant working phase and can't see the solutions, or just can't leave it. And that's one of my biggest problems, that I can't leave things. Right, so I struggle really hard to work through them, to just leave them alone.
So perpetual problem solving state.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And so
I totally understand that and can relate to that. And something you were saying earlier about, it struck me when you were talking about having gone back into some difficult times when you started physio training, and also when you went out to do your rotations. And I just got, if this is totally not accurate, then correct me or tell me what the correct version is, but I just have this feeling of you being an ultimate truth seeker. And that seems to me to be quite a likely common trait in health professionals. We're always looking for the truth of the matter and the solution often, where there is no truth and there is no solution, or it changes. You know, we work in a frustrating profession in many ways, don't we? In that even at physio school, you can't even be taught the truth and the absolutes and the norms. And then we spend our whole lives as truth seekers finding our way through these muddy waters of these damn human beings that don't fit the patterns that we're vaguely aware of.
Oh, yeah, it could be. What I think mostly about myself is that I'm searching for the meaning behind, what does this mean, right?
Yeah.
What does it imply? Not, I'm quite happy about being uncertain and not knowing, but the implication of things. I think this goes back to our training as well, because we are so focused on finding things that we forget the implication of those things, right? So depression as something, or a symptom, or a state of being, whatever you want to call it, it pops up everywhere in MSK, doesn't it? And everyone else, it correlates with everything. It correlates with back pain, it correlates with neck pain, it correlates with all over the shit. And what does it implicate? What does it mean? And I think we are really not good in finding that meaning. We see depression as a correlation, but what it actually means is that it could mean that this person in front of you or yourself is struggling to find the benefit of doing something, is struggling to work on it. Let's have an easy example. I've had Achilles tendinopathy for a long time, and the effort for me to just do something about it, that deviation from a normal routine, was too high a cost for my mental state of being, right? Because I need those routines. This is what I can expect, and this is how I work.
Right.
So I couldn't do them.
It upsets your status quo too much.
Yeah, I just couldn't find the time. Couldn't expect it, and I just couldn't make it through it. And it also means that, like that graph of that Tom Goom puts out on his in his video, because I like that, is it also implies that maybe people with depression, maybe it's not a trigger for back pain, but it makes the back pain a bigger problem.
Yeah.
You see, it means that, so maybe the implication that someone has depression means that there's a bigger struggle of getting through it, of seeing solutions, seeing end goals. And that's another thing. I've never been good at goals, ever. What's your future plan? I don't know.
Yeah, you said.
Right? What do you dream of? I don't know. I had one dream, that was being a Norwegian boat builder. That was the only dream I had. Yeah, it's a good dream. But anything else? No. What do you dream of? I don't know. The next beer, maybe. But so the implication of depression in our clinical life, right? The implication for us as working with people is that depression or anxiety it takes a big percentage of our capability to invest and do something and to see end goals. And when you tell someone with deep, like a depression like me, that's just been there their whole life and quite runs deep and just pukey feeling in the gut, in the stomach, that fighting, a person like myself that has 3 or 4 times a year had to really fight the urge to get a rope, right? And you're telling this person this back pain can last for so long. The implication of time is different, right? So it's not a correlation. It's what does it implicate, and how does it stop ourselves from doing what's good for us? Right?
So if you were my patient, Martin, I'm the physio, you're the patient with the chronic Achilles problem, and I've given you my best thoughts as to the program which will make this better. What would be the best line of questioning or the best approach I could take with you to make you feel that I had really understood those limitations for you and was willing to work with you to get past those? What would be the best question?
Okay. If we had been fully honest with each other, and I would probably, what would benefit me is taking the route of, okay, how much can you do? Does it hurt to run? Yeah. Okay, but let's just find out how much you can run. Because I won't stop running at all. Because that's what I do on Wednesdays. I run. Right? That's my routine. And so maybe more about how can we adapt what you already do, your routine, then rather than changing it, right? Rather than implementing something new.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest takeaway, I think, for clinicians.
How can
adapt.
you make it work with your life?
Yeah.
And how would it be? So in coaching, there's a couple of lines of questioning that I would often employ. One would be, we've talked about it wouldn't be a physio program, it would be a coaching program. What are the potential barriers to you being able to implement this? That would be one. And the second would be, what do you need in order to get to this point or to implement this program? Would those be helpful within a physio clinical scenario at all? What might be the barriers and what do you need?
Yeah, I think that those questions are always beneficial and always good questions. But what we need to realize that if you're suffering from the kind of depression I am, I also struggle to see what I need.
Right.
Right. So I will struggle to identify my needs.
Yeah. To even know what you need.
Yeah. So we're back to that. How can you just adapt what I already do?
Yeah, which is simpler, much simpler.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
That's helpful from a physio to patient perspective. So let's go back to you and so taking your line of meaning and implication. What do you make it mean that you're a physiotherapist suffering with depression or a mental health condition? What do you make that mean in your head, logically or illogically?
Some days, being a physio is my day job. I do it and then I get home.
Yeah.
And some days it means that I have a bigger understanding of what the implications of what this person in front of me is telling me. And in my experience, the conversation about heavy subjects is good back and forth. I could use metaphors quite easily and gain recognition from it. And I had a couple of, I actually have, I think it's 3 persons that I have been working with a long time that really suffers from the depression. And what we're on about is that no non-judgmental talk, we talk about not setting goals. The goals in itself is being here, just doing something good. We don't care about, so especially this one patient with knee pain for many years, and it really hurts. And all we're doing is we're being active together, we're doing something good. We're not trying to get your knee better. We're just doing something good for you, for the whole thing. And this person, exactly this person said something that was, I think I tweeted it as well, but it was a brilliant quote. Okay, so this brilliant quote from this person is, people are telling me to pull myself together, but what they don't know is I've scraped and I pulled and I've gathered everything I got just to be here. So this is me at my limit.
Yeah.
And we need to, the implication and the meaning of that is we can't put too much pressure or challenge on this person. We can't expect too much. And in this case, too much is doing more than just being here.
Yeah.
And that, as clinicians, that puts us into a position of taking each session as it goes and not focusing on the long-term goal. We just react to the day.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that is also transferable to other patients as well, with anxiety and other issues. So the expectation of reaching a goal may not be what we're after here.
Absolutely, yes. Very much having in our heads what the ideal is, and then looking at the person in front and going, well, okay, given what this person has told me about themselves, what part of that is appropriate and how much at this moment. It sounds like that new patient really appreciated your understanding of, exactly as you said, me at my maximum capacity is having turned up here today and gone through this process with you. So that sounds like one of the meanings of you being a clinician with depression is that you have great understanding and empathy and an ability to adapt. What else? What else does being a clinician with depression mean?
Oh man, it means that I take my patients home with me a lot. And it means that I sometimes struggle with finding goals for the patients, even the patients that can be achieved goals for. Yeah, because I struggle to see the end line myself. But recognizing, I think the biggest things about having my own issues and meeting patients is that I can relate, I can understand, I can show empathy, and yeah, I can see that sometimes you can't push that much, right? I can't be the trainer. I'll just be whoever I am, or this person needs today. I've had sessions where we do exercises a little bit for 10-15 minutes, and then we just sit down and talk about something else, because that was the max capacity today. And it's also I think it's given me a leverage in understanding when it's enough, right? When do my line of questioning become more too dangerous to approach, right?
Tell me more about that.
Because there's always a case when you're pushing, as clinicians, we are pushing into lives of people, right? And we know that all other social resources and economy and the life situation will have a part to play in this. It's like the background, it's the foundations of where we can go, and we are trying to continuously push to find this, to dig up these things that we think might relate to the issue at hand. And struggling with depression myself, I think that I have a clearer understanding of when to recognize that line where you can't cross. I can't cross this line today. This needs to just stay alone. I need to back off, right? Because the demeanor, the shutting down, the non-verbal communication, but this is also the way I work. I use a lot of time to get to know people, right? So I have patients I send out with, you don't need me, but here's my number. If you need me, just fuck off and do something else. Don't worry about it. And I have patients that I spend a lot of time with. And so I'll have patients that are booked for 1 hour sessions, and 20 minutes into that, I'll get the signs that this is too much today. Even the talk, even anything, because the person in front of me is talking about stresses about something else they might do. So I'll recognize that and say, well, I'll give you 40 minutes more. I know we said between 10 and 11 today, but like, we'll stop now. You've done enough. This is great for you today. Good on you for showing up. I'll give you 40 minutes to get something else to do. Yeah.
This sounds like such good care, Martin. And, I'm very aware talking to you that I don't know how many other physios there are on your island. Maybe you're the only physio on that island. But even so, what I hear is, well, two things. The great things that actually you as a person can bring to your particular style of physiotherapy because of what you've been through, and not just the depression, I'm sure it's the man you are, I'm sure as well. It's not just the depression that's giving you empathy, but also what I hear is, even though you might be the only physio on this island, and this applies to all of us, we can only be the physio we are on any given day and in any given career. And I think sometimes I talk a lot about professional identity, and I think there's this idea that there's a very generic identity. Yeah. And it's not that we're all trying to squeeze ourselves necessarily into something narrow. It's not just that. It's almost like there's this whole gamut of things we're supposed to be. And if we're not all of them, we're failing somehow. Yeah. And yet, maybe one of the advantages of getting older is realizing we all have our niche and our talents and our specialty. And on many days, maybe the whole of our career, that's the only physio we can be, and that would be the best physio for some people and the worst physio for others.
Exactly. And thinking about that, we can't be a good physio for everyone.
No,
we just can't.
Just as you can't be a good friend for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to recognize the importance we could have, and how little importance we can have for some.
Yes.
And it's about, for me, the whole terminology of being professional is so big, is so much more about the context and the person in front of you than wearing a PK shirt or dress shoes and speaking like this and like that. But it's also about acknowledging that you can't be good for everyone.
Yeah.
And not taking that too seriously. I know this goes against my points of not being able to let things go, so I still rumble on about these things, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think your Society of Average Physios and Failures and your Failure Fridays, all of that is part of this realism. And I stand here and challenge you that you are not a very expert physio, because I'm afraid it seeps through, Martin, as much as you try and hide it, that you do actually know what you're talking about sometimes.
Sometimes,
but
yes.
but I love, you're talking about failures. For me, is going, come on guys, let's drop the bullshit that we're all on this every day, because we're not, let's be honest.
No.
And also let's laugh about it. And humor just seems to thread through your whole life. And I imagine, as with most of us that use humor, sometimes it's a secret weapon and a way in, and sometimes it's a defense mechanism. And let's not overanalyze the rights and wrongs of that, but the way you use humor to lighten up the subject of failures, I find really engaging, and a really pleasant way in.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do as well, because failures are the funniest, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or else we wouldn't get slapstick humor. Right? Yeah. Mr. Bean is all about being failing at, and perhaps it's a bit about difference. Before we had this talk, I've been thinking a lot back and forth, and some theme that I kind of recognize in myself is that my wife, when we do something, especially go on a holiday or do something fun, she'll say like, "Oh, I can live off of this for weeks now." And I'm like, "Yeah, it was good, but now it's today, so I can't keep living on that memory." So sometimes it's about chasing the laugh for another
Chasing
laugh.
the laugh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because some issues I get up against is that depression is seen as a state of continuous sadness, when it's not. It's not that, at least not for me, and I suspect for many for many others, is that I can still laugh, I can still be happy, even if I'm depressed. That's not, I'm not gloomy all day long. It just I'm struggling to see my place or understand my.
Is it sometimes an acknowledgement that, or a willingness to feel, and therefore you're gonna feel the sadness, and you're gonna feel the humor and the lightness too?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, could see it as that. Yeah.
So there's one other area I want to ask you about, and that is the type of support that you have had, if you've had any, within your profession, within physiotherapy, as someone who's suffering with a mental health condition. I want to ask you first, have you had any support? If so, how was it? And if not, what would you like to see in an ideal world?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. My main support is my wife.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, she and the funny thing is, when I said to you, let's do this talk, I've only been honest with about 3 persons. Really honest about 3 or 4. about my struggles, and so it's not a known thing at all. My friends don't know it. My parents don't know. My siblings don't know. Well, my
Wow.
older brother knows, because I had a really bad period in university down in Oslo, where I had a couple of failed suicide attempts, you could say.
Mhm.
But the support, I think, in an ideal world, I think we as physios, as a group, when I talk about honesty with other physios, and I talk about the clinical failures and the clinical expectations, and we're not gods, we're not robotic diagnostic machines, it really kind of bring forth that support and understanding in everyone, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good support in itself. But I think in an ideal world, we would see diagnosis like depression as not a symptom or not a state of being. It's just, I'm not the depression physio, right?
Mm.
I'm not my diagnosis.
Mm.
And I forgot my train of thought there.
So I was asking you what support you'd had, which you've said has come from external sources and within physio when you've been able to be honest. And I was asking you, in an ideal world, perhaps in the future, what you would like to see available, if anything, for clinicians suffering with mental health conditions and other conditions as well.
Yeah, in an ideal, I want physios and other healthcare professionals to be able to go to their friends and go to their colleagues and say, I'm having a really hard time right now.
Mm.
But I can still do my job.
Yeah.
And not see me like that. But this means the implication of this is that maybe I'm not going for wine or beers this evening. Maybe I'm not being as chatty in the lunchroom. Maybe I need to close myself up and just do my notes. This is where I'll use my energy. Maybe some of you can take over a little bit of work from me for today, maybe tomorrow.
Exactly the
Just,
same
yeah.
as you were, sorry to talk over you, exactly the same as you were saying with your patient.
Yeah.
That effectively is, okay, for the next few weeks, months, me showing up is going to be basically getting through the workday and I won't be doing any extras.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the same time, I would say for friends to just show up, right? Because we don't need, well, at least I don't need, in my experience with my patients that I meet, is that we don't always need advice, right? We just need to be listened to and vent, right? So I'm not looking for a solution to my problem at all. I'm saying, this is my capability right now.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to crack a joke if I can. But just, the solution thing is probably my biggest point here, is that stop serving solutions all the time. There is really not a use for it.
Doesn't that just come up again and again and
Yeah.
again? Just listen to me without judgment.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah. And sometimes that's enough, right? We don't even need to touch it again. It's just me in this moment. I needed to say it. And that's yeah, I think that's the being able to go and say, as you said earlier, to just show up and be here and doing my work. This is my limit right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not angry. I'm not angry at you. You've done nothing wrong at all. I just need space, or I need support in the way of, give me that half an hour, give me that maybe even that day off. Just give me something. Give me that beer and let's drink it in peace and quiet, or let's get shit drunk and regret it the next day, or just be there,
whatever
right?
works.
Yeah, whatever works. And this is so individual anyway. So there's not going to be a solution that fits everyone.
And if you were working in a bigger organization than you are, I'm making the assumption you work on your own. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So say you were in a bigger organization, what systems could be in place that aren't routinely in place now to allow for that kind of conversation to be had between colleagues and superiors?
Oh, that's a tough question, isn't it? And what kind of system will be in place? I think that it's less about the system and more about a social, cultural understanding of it, right? And silent agreement between parts. And I think the main issues anyway is the resources we have available to. I think that in most system, in most healthcare, we're down to the bone, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing physios having 15, 20 patients a day. There's no extra capability. If we had that extra capability, there would be more fluidity in tasks. There would be more resources in place to kind of brush over and give people that little bit of time, a little bit of resource they need to get over it. And I think if we had that, we would have more people in place, more people at work, and less people at home, right? You could do a shit job, like like shoveling shit, as I had done a couple of summers. But if you had good people with you, if you have a good conversation, and that really helps a lot. That really just gives that space.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, and I congratulate you, because you are, through the stuff you do online, you are providing a place for that kind of conversation to have. And similarly, I would hope that's what people see in MEHAB, albeit an online option. But I'm sure you agree with me. In my sort of vision for the ideal future is that those kind of things do permeate the everyday and the in-person. And as you say, it becomes an expectation and a culture that these are just the types of conversations we'll have with each other and with our patients. And it's not even a question as whether it's okay to air these things. It's how will it happen?
Yeah, exactly. And going beyond the stigma, you asked me a little bit earlier. The question got lost in my reply. The you don't know how much stigma.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a little village in North Norway. Nobody had depression. So like we don't talk about that. And as a male as well, I don't know if you've seen this TikTok, or is this asking, this girl is asking, okay, men out there, when you're struggling, who do you call? And you got this guy's answering, no one. Are you supposed to call someone? And I've never called anyone at all. So yeah, little island on Norway, not the easiest place to. No, but and this is quite, I mean, about the culture and the communication and the relationships at work as well. Remove the stigma as well as you can do for that sentence to be said. I'm struggling today. Just don't expect me to deliver top-notch shit. I'm just, I'm going through the motions here. Yeah. Even as a health professional. Even as a health professional. Yeah. And that's also my point. My point in the podcast I did with Rob Bevan and Dave I forget his last name, on the back pain pod.
Mm.
Physios are humans too, right?
Yeah.
So we need to see ourselves as that, and as different knowledge, different competence, and specialists in different fields, rather than putting this restraint of expectation from each and everyone to be a diagnostic robot or know-it-all.
I love your phrase, diagnostic robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And continuously working and expressing to new students and new grads and other physios that it's okay to fail. It's okay to be shitty. We can't be an expert all at once. It's okay to Google. It's okay to have meanings, have opinions, and not be afraid to speak them. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the reality is, once we got over ourselves and removed that, the likelihood is that so much good, good culture would emerge, but I suspect some real innovative thinking would come out of that as well. When we just stopped the expectation and the barriers and the things we can't do and say, I'm sure some real great stuff that moves our profession forward will come out of that. I'm not saying it won't anyway, but I imagine it would free things up rather than create problems.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point. Free things up. Free them up, because there's a lot of people there going at work, going through the motions, that just needs that little bit of freeing up.
Loosen the belt a bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Probably.
So that sounds like a good summary point, but Martin, you very kindly at the start gave me permission to ask you, don't worry, I haven't got a killer question coming up. I'm just making the point that you gave me permission to ask what I wanted to ask. Now, I have asked everything I wanted to ask, but having been brave enough to come on here and do this, and I'm even more humbled when you have just shared how many other people actually know about this problem. I'm so grateful that you've done this. Is there anything else that you haven't said yet that you really want to come across and get over? Have we covered everything you wanted to about this topic?
As you said, we could probably talk for 3 or 4 hours about this, because the nature of this conversation is that things pop up, right? And you can't really collect a thing like depression into a 1.5 hour talk, can you?
No.
And so at this moment, I can't remember everything else I wanted to say, I wanted to speak about. But my main points have been, let's see depression not as the correlation, not as the symptoms, but rather what does it mean and what does it implicate with the person in front of us and ourselves, and see beyond the diagnosis, right? And the people with depressions aren't gloomy all the time. That's not how it works. But rather see, what does it implicate? What does it mean in this situation? And freeing up that time. And there's also, this is a tough topic, and I'll be honest right here, that I really regret saying that we could have this conversation, and it became a really big trigger for me for a couple of days. I wasn't in a good place at all, and I barely could function.
And how does it feel now?
Oh, good. I've always been the kind of guy that when I'm doing it, there's no problem.
Yeah.
But before is always the worst. Better to do it than live with the fear of it.
Absolutely. And how about after? Because I know, I have quite a lot of intense and deep conversations with people, and I know that there's a hangover often afterwards. And a lot of self-care needs to take place after this kind of sharing. And I think that's an important point to make, because we've been talking about people opening up and sharing more. Let's be honest, that isn't a get out of jail free card. It's not like you tell someone about it and then the birds start singing and you never feel bad again. It's the almost, I think, the self-care after this kind of thing has to be even greater. What would you, so, for example, after this call, have you learned any ways you need to take care of yourself after an experience like this? And I appreciate it's not something you've done in exactly this format before.
You know what? What's the maybe the best thing and the worst thing about the conversation after conversation like this is my life still goes on as it would. I will still have really shitty periods and I will still have good periods, and it'll just go on. And that's probably the saddest part of it as well, isn't it? That even after an intervention or conversation, a good one at that, life still will push you on. And I always imagine life being this bulldozer that just pushes you ahead. So if you lose something, you can't go back and get it. It's lost. It's just continuously pushing you forward.
Relentless passage of time.
And so I guess we'll see. I guess we'll have to wait and see. As long as I don't become the depression physio now on Twitter, I'm quite happy with it.
No, I mean, that was going to be my sum up, really. And you said that at the start, I don't want this to mean that I become the depression physio. My reflection is that I've learned an awful lot more about you. It's added some colour to the bits I already knew, and I'm sure that will be the case for people listening. My reflection is it presents you as the rounded human being that you are, and we all are. And if you haven't checked out Martin's Society of Average Physios and Failures, go onto Facebook and join that, or look at his threads on Twitter, because I can absolutely guarantee Martin is not a person who is sad all the time. He's not a person who can't access hilarious one-liners, and you bring such joy into our profession with that. So I thank you for that. And today, I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being brave enough to have this conversation. Really huge gratitude. Thank you from me and the rest of us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I guess it's been it's a good conversation, I think.
Good.
And I bet in a couple of hours I'll dig up something else, a good point or two, but I think we made some.
I think you made some great points, and email me those extras and I will stick them in the show notes. And I'm sure this is the start of many conversations anyway. So there'll be more.
There'll always be more. And also, I like to think there's always this next book to read, this next movie to watch, this next song to listen to. So it's always that next thing. You don't always know what it is, but there's this next thing.
Yeah. Keeps on going. Thank you, Martin. We better stop there. Maybe it's part 1 of 10 parts. I don't know. We better listen to that. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to that episode with Martin. Now, more than ever, I would love to hear what you think about this episode. I would love to hear what you thought about having this conversation on the background of clinical professions, the idea of us being able to discuss mental health conditions and other conditions and what's going on for us personally within our workplaces, so that they can be not necessarily accommodated, but at least acknowledged. I'd love to hear what you think about that. I would also love to hear if you work in somewhere where this is all being handled beautifully. If there are examples of good practices out there, then I'd love to hear about them. Please share, because it will help us all. If you personally would like any support with anything which is going on for you, then please get in touch. The services that I offer through MeHab are coaching services. Hand on heart coaching may not be the appropriate form of support, depending on what it is that you're currently experiencing. But if this has made you aware of something that you want to address and you're not quite sure what might be appropriate, then please get in touch, and I'll do my very best to support you and signpost you to the right people. Thank you ever so much for listening. If you are a clinician, if you are a clinician with some normal life going on, if you are a clinician with some normal life and occasionally some heavier stuff going on, if you are a clinician with normal life, occasionally some heavier stuff going on, and you are still being all things to everybody all day and everywhere, then please stop, breathe, rest, get in touch, talk, because you matter.